So, well, I think that was quite nice drinks. I still wonder what it might do to my guts tonight, so to stay in the theme a little bit. But now we move on to our next speaker. Please welcome Eva Davidova. Eva is a Spanish-Bulgarian multidisciplinary artist based in New York. The issues of her work, behavior, cruelty, ecological disaster, and manipulation of information emerge as paradoxes rather than assumptions. In an almost fairy tale fashion, her practices involves drawing, performance, interactive installations, and participatory VR, computer-generated 3D, sculpture, and photo-based animation. Her work has been shown at the Bronx Museum, the Everson Museum, Albright Knox Museum, MACBA-CAAC in Sevilla, Instituto Cervantes, and Círculo de Bellas Artes, among others. She is recipient of the Bangaga International Award for Digital Art, the MTEL Award for Contemporary Bulgarian Art, and a Residency Unlimited NEA Fellowship for US-based artists. Well, the floor is yours. Please go ahead, looking forward. Good luck.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm looking forward to talking more later. Thank you to the curators, and thank you for the amazing IMPAKT team. I will do a brief presentation of the project Global Mode, which part of it I'm presenting at IMPAKT with the VR piece called Global Mode, Narcissus and Drowning Animals. And more than really a presentation, it will be a layer of thoughts. Please stop me if you have questions or if what I'm saying is not understandable. I drew many animals and piles of bodies, countless images of war. Then the animals became something else, atavic, unknown, and somehow mythological. First, it was the Hamelin Piper who became the herder of unknown animals. Then Cassandra, the one who has the power to foresee the future, but it's completely powerless as no one believes her. Then I saw Medusa as a multi-tentacled propaganda, turning her head around, glaring against her own gaze. Then Narcissus, surrounded by drowning animals, Prometheus herding Pegasus, and Saturn devouring his children, as devouring our descendants. Playing with the paradox, I imagine us by being built by our future descendants, humans, cyborgs, AI, animals, bacteria, and pose a question. If we are the games our children will program one day, can we influence the code they're writing? Can we pull the particles of another reality into this one? Could we contaminate this reality with something else? So the next piece is called Bird's Birth, and probably was one of the first pieces I did with the project Global Mode, and one of the most visceral ones, where I literally wanted to literally bridge the remoteness between our actions and their outcomes. The sound is by Hans Tammen, who is a wonderful German, New Yorker composer with whom I collaborate from time to time. And it's usually presented as a sculptural piece in a loop, but here The next piece I will show is documentation of the project Global Mold, Narcissus and Drowning Animals. This is from a show in New York in the space where eventually we did this virtual reality piece, which is now at the Sound of One Computer Thinking exhibition. Thank you again for inviting me to show it here. And this is a documentation. The sound is by Matthew Gant, but he not only did the sound, but also worked with me on the Max interactions, and also Kyle Meredith helped at some point. Global Mode, Narcissus and Drowning Animals. It's an interactive VR piece which explores ecological disaster, cruelty, and manipulation of information through the mixture of mythology-based scene and the projection in the real space around, where the participants' own body becomes a broadcast interface to involve the viewers themselves. I'm interested in the use of VR in a direction away from defined outcome and reproduction of reality, free from the constraints of our own prejudices regarding the real reality, and even before we know exactly how and why and what, we could act in the virtual, mixing elements of the rules of different games and that will annoy us and force us to question each and every one of these rules while we still play and let go judgment, but hopefully not justice. The idea for me to work with VR is that we can invent new actions and new spaces, create the spaces where new brain connections can occur. The next project I'm going to show very briefly is called Intentions. And it is it is a project very dear to me because it explores both emotions, the kidnapping of our emotions, the utilization of our emotions, and the possibilities of play within technology. So this is the original animation called Intentions, Transfer, and Disappearance 2. Both heads are made with the exact same set of photographs. The head on the left is 2D, classic 2D animation. The left on the right is photogrammetry animation. And what was very important for me is that the software, the photogrammetry software, did something that a lot of current AI systems do, which is to average all the photographs, all the expressions, find a base, normal face, and then present that as a 3D model of all the information that they have fed to it. And when I started presenting this animation, I thought that it would be much better if it becomes interactive and people can see in real time how their facial expressions are affecting the AI, how our little AI called Thisbe is learning their expressions. And I don't have photos here of it, but if you smile, she smiles. If you shout, she shouts. And at the same time, the other head is taking a photo of you and placing it over a model, which I think is something that happens also when we get feedback from a lot of AI-controlled advertising or even libraries. We get our information averaged with others' information and then returned to us as if it was our own avatar, but it's really not. And for me, it's very interesting to think about learning as well as we're in a school here. Dr. Francisco Mora, a neurologist and scholar of brain plasticity, says that little can be thought or learned without the mediation of emotion. How this statement refers to our exchange with AIs, such as Alexa, or the much more hidden and sneaky ones that make us fear our expressions and believe us inadequate. My aim in this work is to render the empathy of these programs and the supposed real feedback pre-programmed, and through glitches and cracks in the software, prove it also mutable, actionable upon. For example, in this piece, Thisbe is still learning, and she's not a great student, but a lot of people found ways to trick her into showing their actual faces, like, for example, showing tongues, and learning of how to manipulate the system was almost intuitive after a certain time of play. And to end on a festive mode, part of my practice is to organize events to get people together to talk about seemingly disparate issues, but which are obviously connected and maybe not put together enough. So this was performative dinner at the exhibition space in New York, where we invited artists like Marina Zurkov or Abigail Simon. Matthew Gunn was there, Greg Lichtenstein, Marco Castro Cosillo, Tali Hinkins from the Love It group, etc., etc. And we served foods which combined a piece of food that will disappear with a piece of food that has been the sustenance of humanity through its history, and which probably will continue to be so. And we tried to, and all the menu was based on contrast and questioning. And meanwhile, people were reading in an exquisite corpse style from different books, and discussing very heatingly about technologies and our own roles in these various disasters. And this was just a plate with an interface for eating and interface for self-extermination, And also this is an image of in the gallery now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this enchanting world you are showing us. We will talk later in the panel, and we will go straight on with the next speaker. Joana Moll is a Barcelona, Berlin-based artist and researcher who work critically explores the way post-capitalist narratives affect the alphabetization of machines, humans, and ecosystems. Her main research topic include internet materiality, surveillance, social profiling, and interfaces. She has lectured, performed, and exhibited her work in different museums, art centers, universities, festivals, and publications around the world. Furthermore, she is a co-founder of the Critical Interface Politics Research Group at Hangar in Barcelona, and co-founder of the Institute for Advancement of Popular Automatisms. She is currently a visiting lecturer at Universiteit Potsdam and the Escola Superior d'Arte de Vic in Barcelona. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, good night. Thanks everybody to still be here. No, it's a joke, it's really, really good. Sorry, Arjen. So, I'm going to present this project that I developed within the IMPAKT residency this year. The project is still not official, like I said, I didn't launch it yet, even though it's been here in exhibition and it was also featured at Ars Electronica. So this presentation is going to be rather simple because there's a lot of thoughts that I'm articulating around this piece, and I didn't have time to think it through, but I'll do my best, right? So everything started when I bought this book. The book is in the exhibition. So this is a book by Jeff Bezos, on the life lessons and rules for success, and it has an incredibly long subtitle. It's a pity that we can't read it here, right? But I mean, regardless of this very long text here in the first page, the book is just 62 pages long. Just this. Some of the people, I guess, had the chance to read it today at the exhibition. The line spacing, it's massive. And font size, I don't know, it's more than 16 or 18, right? So let's say it's, well, there's not a lot of text there. So, well, obviously there is obvious reasons why I chose this book, and I guess you're going to see it while I'm presenting the project. So what I did, I just tracked all the interfaces that Amazon made me go through while I was purchasing the book. Yeah? I just did the minimum steps possible. Yeah? I didn't click to ads, I didn't click to recommendations, I didn't go back, I didn't go forward, just plain and simple. So Amazon, even though it was a very simple move what I did, it just made me go through 12 different interfaces. Yeah? So here you see like the first 4. So first was like, okay, I was looking for Jeff Bezos in the main page. Then after I just put search for Jeff Bezos, I've got like a list of items related to Jeff Bezos. There was masks, there was a lot of things. But then I just, well, I knew exactly which book I wanted to buy because, of course, I was releasing before doing this, right? And then I got this book, and then I got the book with all these comments, which some of them are very good. I mean, people does actually have something to say about the book, regardless being so small. And then after I say, yeah, I want this, add to the basket, it's like, oh, maybe you're interested in buying more things related to all these, well, influential people, like, for example, Nike and Elon Musk. Yeah. Bill Gates, of course, was there. And after that, so they asked me to put the shipping address. Okay, I did that. And then after that, Amazon asked me to sign in. And after that, they said to me, okay, this is your basket, that's what you have, yeah? So proceed to checkout. Then I have to choose my shipping options. Then I had to select the payment method. Then I had to choose a billing address for the second time. And this wasn't a mistake, because every time I did this, I had to add a second billing address constantly. This was weird. And then, yeah, okay, review your order. Okay, that's great. And, okay, your order has been successfully placed. And by the way, do you want to buy some Michelle Obama, some Mobile Gates, some, well, Alibaba, yeah, which is like, yeah. Surprisingly, there is no Chinese influential people here, right? Because they are quite big in tech. So it's also interesting that they are not in Amazon, among many other people. But, well, that was like my journey through the Amazon website. And surprisingly, I could identify, because I also track all the code that executed in my browser while I was purchasing all these items. So even though there was 12 interfaces, I could track more than 8,000 pages of printed code. Yeah? So the difference is massive, right? And printed in an AI format. Yeah? With the font size, I think it was 11, so it was quite small. Yeah? So the difference is quite massive. Yeah? And also, if you find like, well, I mean, the code is what really executes the business model of Amazon, yeah, which is based in, they say, obsessive customer focus, which basically means just track everything you can from the user, customize the page, so the user can buy more, and this will generate more revenues for Amazon, yeah, at the end of the day. So you compare like the amount of pages of this business model with the book of Bezos, there's also something that doesn't add up, yeah? Anyway, so that's what I did, and it was very, very surprising. And then I did this piece, which we're going to go through, which is called, again, the hidden life of an Amazon user, especially because all this code, I mean, it's not really accessible to the average user, yeah? And again, this is what puts the business model of Amazon at work. But here there is another layer, which this was what I was really interested in showing, which is the amount of energy that I had to assume, how can I put this? So the business model executed, let's say all this code executed in my browser, right? And most of this code was basically based on tracking user behavior, which ultimately generates revenue for Amazon, yeah? But part of the energy consumption of such process fall on me. So I was not just being monetized just by means of free labor, but I also had to assume a portion of the energy needed to do this, yeah? And let alone like the environmental footprint, which I cannot control either. Yeah? So the project just talks about this. So here what we can see, well, it's a 15-minute scroll. If you just keep on pressing like that. So here in this project we can see all the interfaces with the code that was laying beyond those interfaces. Yeah, so it's first interface code. The first page had an incredibly amount of code. Just to run through all the first page code takes like more than 5 minutes. Yeah, so it's a third of the whole project. Which it also makes sense because everybody will access the first page, yeah? So they know they can take a lot of information from that first page, and so on. So the whole project added up to, well, all the code I involuntarily loaded in my browser was more than 80 megabytes. It took me an average of 30 to 50 watts per hour to operate this. And the kilocalories, I just calculated the amount of kilocalories that it took me to perform like all this process. Yeah. So the process, the project is quite simple, but there is a lot of thoughts and reflections I think that this trigger, and this is quite complex. This is quite what I'm saying, that I'm not quite ready to talk deeply in a talk. Yes, in the Q&A and the panel I would be glad to, but I'm still articulating thoughts in that direction. For the project, we also produce some booklets that now we are waiting for third version, which is they contain like texts by Jussi Parikka, by Hara Rocha, and Soren Paul and Kristin Ulrik Andersson, which exactly they just follow up on all these thoughts and reflections that the piece trigger from 3 different perspectives. You can get this sort of flyers, booklets in the exhibition. You can take them if you visit the piece. And, well, as I said, this could be very simple and sort of fast, I guess. But we can discuss it more further. If you have more questions, I will be more than glad to answer it. Or I can wait till 15 minutes have passed. I will just, here it comes. That's the second interface. Phew. And here we go. So yeah, I can just keep on pressing until, how much do I have? 5 minutes. No, I think we can leave it at that. So, yeah, because, I mean, it doesn't get more exciting than that. Yeah. Well, there is like a final quote, like it's a secret quote from Jeff Bezos that it's displayed at the very end, but you need to scroll to the whole project, because if you cheat, it's not displaying. Yeah? So, well, feel welcome to go to the exhibition and do it. It's over there. Yeah. Here's the third one. That was so fast. Okay, thank you very much.
Well, that's quite impressive.
Thank you.
The hidden world of our Amazon website. Thank you very much. Then we are getting ready for the last presentation for the panel. Johannes Heldén. Johannes Heldén is a visual artist, writer, and musician. His interdisciplinary works deal with poetry, ecology, artificial intelligence, sentience, and narrative structures. Recent projects include Astroecology, which was published simultaneously in 3 languages, made into an interdisciplinary performance at the Royal Dramatic Theatre in Stockholm, and a digital artwork published by Bonnier Konsthal. He has published 17 books, 4 music albums, and 7 digital online works of poetry and visual arts. Johannes, take it away.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much to IMPAKT and the curators. So I'll just speak quite briefly about the project that I'm showing in the exhibition, and maybe one other. So this work is called Encyclopedia, and it's a collaboration between me and Håkan Jonsson, who is also an artist and a programmer. And this piece, this image here, is from the Riga Biennial. It's an algorithm-based work. It consists of index card, old-fashioned library catalog cards. So what we did was we took a website called Encyclopedia of Life, and we built an algorithm, a software, that scrubbed that website for descriptions of real existing animals. And then the algorithm combined the information, the descriptions of real animals, and created new fictive species from that. Here is an example. And these species are then printed on the cards, and after the printout, the PDF, the generated PDF, is deleted. So as a visitor, when you see the work, when you experience it, you're welcome to take a card, to take a species, and that will be the only instance of that generated fictive species that is also made extinct by humanity in the future. So there's this sort of double, double exposure of something being extinct already now and being extinct in the future. And if you lose your card, if you lose your species, that's the end of it. So this one reads, their coloration was extraordinarily vibrant. They ate all kinds of plants, grass, wildflowers, blackberries, buds and leaves from trees and bushes. A habitat requirement was the placement of suitably secluded den locations, which could consist of caves, large hollow trees, or dense vegetation. The dens could be vast and could sometimes accommodate multiple families. The young were carried on their mother's back, very well camouflaged. Habitat fragmentation as a result of forestry, urbanization, and agriculture was a major threat. Made extinct by humans, 2188 AD. And another example. So what you see here is then, it's a collage of sorts of existing animals, like I mentioned. So you could get a mix of blue whale, dragonfly, badger, all in one card. And in the data set that the work is built upon, there we didn't change it, but we did remove specific descriptions of existing species. So it never says that this card is a bird or a fish or something like that, which makes it more open to the reader, to the viewer. To one person it can be something, to another something else. And we also calculated the number of possible permutations on the data set as it is now. And it is, I believe, around 15 quadrillion possible species. Yeah, I think it's 18 zeros or something like that behind the 15. Yes, and let me also show another collaboration that I did with Håkan Jonsson. This piece is called Evolution. It's also an algorithm-based work online. And the purpose of the work is to replace me as writer and artist. And what it does is that it continuously analyzes all my published poetry collections and creates a poetry stream online that is different depending on each time you refresh the page or you enter the website. And for me to make this work in collaboration with Håkan has been very interesting, both as a sort of artwork in itself, but also for my writing practice, to know that something is constantly, continuously trying to replace me. And I've been watching this generator for many hours. And I can say, like, in a way, it's an ongoing process. It's maybe a successful failure or the other way around. Building the algorithm, we realized that if we wrote too many rules for it, it would just replicate my books from basically page 1 to the end again, exactly like they are. It analyzes the white space in between words and treats them as words as well to replicate or create a page that is similar to the way I structure my own poetry. And if we write too few rules, the sort of nonsense factor is constantly very, very high, which is, in a way, it is anyway. But one thing I noticed when working on it is if I left it overnight, maybe around 30,000 generations in, one generation being keeping a word or replacing it, or keeping a white space or replacing it. At that point, I find it at times better than me, or at least way more bizarre than me, which is an interesting experience. And what else? Maybe I can end with saying that when, or still as we're working on it, it has multiple glitches that is, for us, is hard to track for some reason. And also for some reason, in one of my books, in one of my poetry collections, I've written the words Toyota Land Cruiser. I'm not sure why I wrote that in a poem. but the algorithm took a liking to that word. And it kept popping up all the time in the generated poetry, like not in any way statistically possible. So in the end, we had to write a specific rule saying, no more Toyota Land Cruiser. Thank you.
So I would like to invite the speakers to the couch on stage. We can have a little discussion about what we've been listening to. No, I try to involve them as well a little bit later on, so that's easier than when I stand, I think. I was just wondering, there are some similar topics, what you have been addressing. It's basically all a little bit about the relationship between humans and animals, about how we as humans perceive the world around us. And it also all seems to be about how important it is to make everything more transparent, to somehow gain more knowledge about the world we're living in, or to know just more about what the actual effects are of what we are doing. It seems to me that in this day and age, this is even more necessary than before. Is this something you also feel, that we are on a brink of a period that we are so much, I don't know, from a helicopter view, trying to pinpoint ourselves in our existence? And, well, this dystopian idea, like maybe this is the last decade, we still have some innocence left. And then it's really the tipping point where we go to a whole new... You see it in science fiction, in films, in movies, and I see it in your work also, a kind of. Could one of you maybe reflect on this?
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to cover anybody, but yeah, this sofa is too wide for me. Sorry.
You can stand up as well if you prefer.
I don't know how to sit, but yeah. So, okay. So.
You want to sit on my lap?
I mean, okay.
Go stand.
Sorry, it's just too late for me. Okay. So, to elaborate on your question, I think we do are in a critical point. We are, and I think it's more necessary than ever before. Well, before was actually very necessary to reveal like the true nature of our infrastructures, yeah, and especially to reveal the complexity, because basically surveillance capitalism, cognitive capitalism, or name it, I don't know, anything, basically tries to raise friction, tries to raise complexity. And I really feel that's one of the main reasons why we got to this place, yeah, because all the processes, narratives that actually run our day-to-day lives, yeah, they are very twisted, they are too obfuscated. People don't understand how this works. And well, it's very hard to change something if you don't know what you've been governed by, right? So yeah, that's why it's particularly critical.
I think it's very important to try to subvert the workings of a technology in order to understand how it works and in order to open these cracks where one can go in and not only show what's going on and raise an alarm, but also show that it's possible to do something. And technologies are becoming more opaque and more privatized and more based on behavior loops, like feedbacks. I give you this, you give me this, and what I give you is a mashup of what you gave me, and so on and so on. In the end, it is really someone has to put spikes in the wheel.
Yeah, I think that this notion of transparency is really a good one to bring up, because I think everybody has sort of participated in that. And as you said, this need for revealing things and revealing these practices that are going on in everything from biotechnology to corporate identity to how the technologies are working is really imperative. And I think that there's a kind of need also, and I think maybe this is a moment, but maybe it's been going on for a long time, to sort of look at our criticality of it and how that can, you know, move us forward in whatever, like in new directions. That's my main, you know, interest.
Yeah. And for you, Johannes, on the one hand, I think we all do think that the artistic practice and the research that has been done in these kind of domains is actually, well, giving some kind of feedback and criticism towards a larger discourse. But at the same time, of course, you as artists also just try to reveal your own, I don't know, world or domain. How is this for you? This, on the one hand, a more personal investigation in different forms of work and different, well, ideas, and at the same time you're reflecting at this larger world as well.
That's a good question. I believe, for me in my work, I use the idea of science fiction, or actually things taking place in the future, like thinking to myself that my works are literally made many years from now, which makes me free, and it also somehow gives me the freedom to combine both something very personal but also reflecting on the state of this planet and the world today. Basically astroecology in a way, science fiction. And that was sort of I believe maybe my only entrance point to these kind of works is starting with myself and then trying to expand it to something else and trying to make sense of my world, and then, this might sound like a cliche, but writing poetry or making art today, somehow I believe that you need to be, either you want it or not, you're referring to or being aware of the state of the planet by addressing it or not. Not sure if that's an answer, but...
Yeah, I think it is. Is there in the audience anyone who has a question for one of the panelists? Don't be shy.
Hello? Oh, it's more a comment than a question, but picking up from what you were saying about transparency and obfuscation, Joana, apparently even artificial intelligence needs to hold on to a concept, no, Johannes? Like your AI is trying to fixate on this notion until you erase it. I come away with a word you said, crawl space. It's a very visual image. Maybe I need to come away protected from this whole idea. And from you, Kathy, from earlier today, the notion of a robot gut also stuck in my mind very firmly as a very visual image. It's a comment, not question.
Okay. So we have this this mic here. So anyone who has a question can just raise your hand and we will get this to you. Meanwhile, I was wondering, is there any possibility that you people would like to work together on certain levels? Most of you are working in multidisciplinary labs, and is it that you have been meeting in the past, or are you interested in each other's work to mix it up or something?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
I mean, I think the thing that's really interesting about my colleagues on this panel is the way that they work with not only this notion of making things transparent, but then also this kind of public imaginary, like planting the ideas of their work. This is one of the jobs that artists have, and everyone here, I think, is doing it so well that it would be a dream to work together.
Yeah. And do you have the idea that somehow the consequences of your work or the way it's contributing to a more general discourse, that it's getting out there enough? Sometimes I feel that we are preaching too much to our own people, that we need to look for ways to get it towards a broader audience, because it's so important and so vital to this day and age. Is this something that bothers you on a daily basis, and what could you do about this?
Yeah, totally. It's also something we're discussing with Nicholas before, exactly that, before we entered the room. And yeah, sometimes you feel like you are in an echo chamber, right? They're just repeating the same things to the same people, exactly, and something gets out from here. But on the other hand, it's not so easy to find other context or to be included in other contexts. I remember this year I gave this talk on data and sustainability at CPDP, which is one of the major conferences in data and privacy in Brussels, which is full of policymakers, politicians, corporates, and so on. And I mentioned this, there was no panel that was treating this issue whatsoever, which I think is quite critical, but nobody asked me any question, nobody made any comment. So it's very strange, right? Because this really was a platform to reach wider audiences, but the audiences didn't react either. So it's not so easy. Yeah. Yeah, no, but it's really an issue to talk about, because I think it's quite critical indeed.
I take the liberty to paraphrase another artist who is not in the exhibition, but it's not here tonight, Lynn Hirschman-Leeson. I heard her speak in Madrid recently, and she talks about her project with cells and etc. And she was saying that artists are like the T cells, like the lymphocytes, which identify sicknesses, diseases. And I do think that even though the actual artwork, it's not always, it's almost never visible enough or spread enough or paid enough for that matter. But even though this happens, it works like a crack. It works like a mycelium, which is slowly eating up the concrete. And maybe this is related to these plants which are growing now in toxic waste. And if these plants didn't exist, it would be even worse, I guess.
Yeah, some kind of a canary in the coal mine. When
or new species which can spring from something that you did in the future, or something that Joana or Kathy are doing.
Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful thought. Yeah. Still the audience? Any there? Yeah, now I can throw this thing.
Hello. Oh. Something came up actually in listening to you speak, Kathy, about anthropomorphizing non-human subjects. And I'm just curious, when you're working with the rats, you're talking about laughter and talking about enjoyment. And I wondered how much you thought about placing human characteristics on non-human subjects. And also for the other artists who work with non-human subjects, how do you think about that?
I guess I'll start. Thank you. So yeah, I think anthropomorphism is a really tricky thing, and I think that we have no capability but perhaps to practice that, because we are anthros. And so we are in this position, this maybe good, maybe bad position of sort of trying to interpret the world from our own position. And obviously we're all, here, and probably many of you, trying to subvert that and trying to think of alternatives and radical ways to tweak that. But often I find that anthropomorphism, while it can go very, very bad and be wrong, because it does impose us on an animal's personality or interpreting an animal, etc. Sometimes I think that it also is employed to evoke empathy for an animal. And I do find that in this case, in talking about rat laughter, for example, that When I say the word laughter, people understand that concept very quickly. So I'm trying to look for a kind of shortcut to a term that invokes a real positive reaction to something, emotional positive reaction. And I think that while it may be considered a human gesture or human emotion, it's also been exhibited in many other species, in fact. And so I think you're right, scientists, I've often have been corrected by scientists when I use that term, and they're like, well, it's really just positive, reactions. I'm like, okay, I got that. But if I say rat positive reactions, it doesn't have the same oomph. So I do sometimes use it to cut to the chase. And it is either effective or not, I admit. So, but I totally agree that it can be tricky. And thank you for calling it out. Yeah.
For me, it's, I don't know if it's anthropomorphism, although the shapes are anthropomorphic, but for me it's almost the opposite, like I'm trying to become the animal. It reminds me actually of when I learned about the creation of real scientific chimeras, mixed human genes with animal genes or different animals. I was just, please don't kill the chimeras. So for me, that was the important thing. It didn't matter if they're half human or not. And I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a mixture for me.
I saw another question.
Yeah.
Kat. So it's one more flippant question for Joanna and Kathy. Like, how many rat lives does it take to buy a Jeff Bezos book? But actually, Joanna, I'm interested. It's a really great project, and I don't know if one of the reasons that people don't ask questions is because they feel immediately guilty of the amount of energy they're using when they're using the web. But this idea that the web is so baggy now, and that it used to be optimized, used to reduce images, and there used to be hardly any video and stuff like that. And it seems to be that we're at sort of peak bagginess of people putting stuff online and not even considering the size of the files and what we're doing and how much energy it's taking. And I wondered if you could comment on where you think it's going next. Now we know that we're using so much energy. What's the next stage of the web?
So it's a great question, because I think here we need to analyze efficiency. Yeah, and what efficiency means and the narratives of efficiency. I recently came across, okay, I will back up. Because the thing is, like you say, right, that the web allows for more videos, for more images, for everything, right, to have much more information, which at the same time is polluting much more. Yeah. So the thing is, the web, all those technologies have become much more efficient in terms of size. They can be just more smaller. They can operate faster, and they can have more energy. They can have more data, more information, right? And this supposedly efficiency should just save energy, yeah? But what's happening with efficiency, there is this paradox called the Jevons paradox, that when you make something more efficiency, there is straight away much more demand. Therefore, it doesn't, make it efficient anymore. It's efficient, but there is much more production. Yeah, so it doesn't save any energy, and it's not sustainable. And I think that's exactly where we're heading, because we're trying to improve anything in terms of this efficiency, this idea of efficiency that at the end is not efficient. Yeah, so I think that's very problematic. I think that's what we're heading. Yeah, it's making more efficient, so we can keep on building data centers, and store more data and use more energy in a more efficient way. Yeah. But that's really problematic. It's a term of efficiency and progress, of course. I think. Well, it's my personal opinion.
looking at the way you're sitting on the couches, to me feels a bit also representing the positions in the debate with Joana falling a bit off. But then I was thinking, what might be a future that could bring you together, and that's maybe quantum computing. I'm very interested how, because I see parallels in how you look at nature and what, at least I imagine, what quantum computing could be. I've got no clue. So maybe your response to how the emergence of quantum computing will influence your work. That's my simple question.
Just my legs are too short for the sofa. I'm not intending to go out, but that's my only comment here. I have no clue what quantum computer is, so I mean I know, but I can't explain it.
I mean, it seems.
Just maybe especially a question to Katya, because you work with real scientists. Are they expecting quantum computing? Do you hear that there will be some breakthrough because of quantum computing?
Well, I think everybody here.
It's not a subject.
No, I'm sure it is a subject, but I don't know. I don't actually know. I have not had that conversation. It's probably a really good question, and I'll ask and get back to you. But I also think that everybody here is sort of involved in working with experts in particular areas, and maybe we should all ask this question.
Just one quick comment about quantum computing is, and it pertains precisely to this discussion, is the massive energy usage used to cool quantum computing, and of course that adds to global warming, which is of course an underlying theme to today's discussion. Just to point that out.
And the whole thing is that quantum computing is supposed to be more efficient, right? So we are going the same, yeah.
I think part of this discussion.
Too silly.
Two-fisted, yes.
Part of this discussion is maybe, as humanity, we have to stop thinking in this terms of things need to be bigger and better and faster, and it should be less. I just was at Mosfest in London, and Rachel Culprit from 1.0, I think, gave this beautiful talk about just enough internet. But something that we have to start constraining ourselves and not only trying to get to the next level, because just there is a next level possible, but questioning, like the discussion on G5 at the moment. Why do we want this? Maybe we don't want it.
Yeah.
Is it still alive? Yes. I have a question for Johannes. I was wondering if how the algorithmic rendering of your own poetry and literature kind of influenced your writing after that. Does it have some kind of influence to your new writings?
That's a great question, and yes, it does. One of the things, I didn't mention it here, but like when we did the work, we also did like a sort of manifesto in a publication, and that manifesto ended in the year 2017, I think it was. Johannes Heldén stops writing poetry, has been replaced. And I mean, someone is still writing poetry and publishing books under my name. But there is this sort of, for me personally, I can say, yes, it's the algorithm that's writing my books, and I'm curating them. But on a more like actual, when I'm in the process writing now, yes, it has changed me. It's been sort of a landmark, both the experience of making the work and trying to make it succeed, and also trying to understand what success would be in that case. What does it mean to be replaced what does it mean to have a style as a writer or an artist, and who is the judge of that? And I also incorporated the algorithm or the AI, if you will, as a part in my writing, actually referencing it. So, yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. No? Yes.
Yeah, so I have a great question.
That's good.
For Joana. So yeah, I think there is a very interesting line between, let's say, the way you try to reveal the economic growth model of Amazon and its relation with energy growth. And I was wondering if you plan to expand the energy assessment of the activity of an Amazon purchase to other layers than only the navigator or the browser. So do you want to take into account all the other basically parts of the infrastructure and also the physical infrastructure that is put into action around that?
Well, it is a great question. Thank you. Not particularly for Amazon, because I feel like a lot of people already explored these topics and they have done it beautifully. For example, there is all the research by Regine Devati on that area, which is amazing. I explored infrastructures and the impact of infrastructures, materiality, and so on in many other projects. But yeah, I think it would be nice to make like a map of all these, totally. But I think that it also very hard, right? Because when you start pulling the string, it's just massive. I mean, you would map the whole universe at the end, yeah? And it's, yeah, it's hard to... because then there is going to be a lot of biases, yeah? Because it's going to be still like a very Europe-centric a way of looking at all this energy consumption, right? I don't know. It's good to think about it, though. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I was thinking of a last question for each of one of you. I'm always very curious what your next step will be. What's the next question or the next domain or the next point you really would like to dive into? Will we start with Joana?
Okay, so until now, I feel like I've been really focusing for many years on revealing and generating awareness in many issues, surveillance, social profiling, all this ecosystem of data, commercialization of data, and so on, especially sustainability and data. But now, my next projects are going to be in really looking and developing tactics to counteract all this. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do in my next
give
project.
An example? How can you do that? Okay, we have to wait for.
Yeah, no, because it's a little bit sensitive. I'm still talking to lawyers, and I can't say yet, but okay. I will.
And when can we see your projects online? The bezels, the Amazon.
The bezel's going to be probably in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we will probably be posted by the IMPAKT website. Yes, thank you. Kathy?
It's a great question. I never know exactly how to answer it, so I'll fudge this one. I think that, of course, I'm going to take the rat laughter piece now back to the rats to see how they react to it and to actually try to follow that up a little bit. That's kind of an area that I'm interested in. And to get their input, because it's really a project for them and not for us. But I think the other thing is I'm trying to think about, I mean, you mentioned tactics. I'm really trying to think about ways to sort of push ideas that I've been working with, as you saw, forward so that they can maybe activate people to do similarly. I'm kind of feeling a little bit desperate, as we all are, and a kind of urgency to the work. So. That you saw a little bit of that in the last project I talked about with the Becoming Vulture. But I think there's a way that I really want to try to think through some of the crises that we're facing, which is a little vague, but that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah. Makes sense. Eva?
Yes, there are always a lot of things flying around, but my desire for the next steps is to do more and more participatory work and really put in practice the idea that uncertainty and play can change the behavior in a very long term, and playing together also makes a difference. So the public space has been always very interesting for me, and more even now that it has become more data and less public. But also I want to see how the human gesture, play, body can insert into it again.
Thank you. Johannes?
Yes, these two works that I've shown tonight, that I did with Håkan, my collaborator, we always thought about it as a trilogy, so we're figuring out what the third work and final work in this series will be. Not quite sure yet, but it might have something to do with plants or other planets.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for all your inspiration and beautiful stories. Thank you for all your attention. And I think we can continue our conversation at the bar. Okay.